Okay, hello everyone. Dear webinar audience, welcome to our session titled Navigating Life in Singapore on an Allowance of $1,000. My name's Sophia, and I'm going to be your host for today. Currently, I am pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, but today I'd like to share a bit more about myself as we begin this afternoon webinar. My interests do include traveling, reading, tennis, photography, film, and Netflix on the side. I'm excited to be here with you today to share practical tips and insights on how to make the most of your budget while living in Singapore. So let's get back to the basics, and before we begin, let's review a few house rules. This webinar will last about 60 minutes, and we encourage all of you to join a few minutes early to ensure a prompt start. We will begin and end on time out of respect for everyone's schedule, and this session will be recorded and made available on our student marketer LinkedIn pages for those who wish to review it later or couldn't attend live. So now I'm very pleased to introduce my co-host today, Melissa Tan. She will provide you with more details about today's webinar and introduce our esteemed speakers. On to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Sophia. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Tan, a Singaporean studying in the Bachelor of Psychological Science. Some facts about me is that I love outdoor sports like hiking, swimming, climbing, and I enjoy classical literature or writing poetry from time to time. And I do love traveling as well. I'm part of the Taekwondo club, the bouldering, and I was previously part of the track and field team. And I've had a dream of becoming a clinical psychologist since I was 13, as I've always wanted to help other people. Well, just a few reminders before we begin. Please type your questions in the Q&A chat box, and we will address them during the Q&A session at the end. To ensure clear audio for everyone, please keep your microphones muted. Lastly, the opinions expressed during this webinar are those of the student marketers and do not necessarily represent the views or policies of James Cook University, Singapore. Now, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Vivek. Vivek is here to share his experiences and tips on how we can manage our expenses in Singapore on a given allowance. So, Vivek, please tell us
Uh,
more about yourself.
yeah, thank you, Melissa. And good afternoon to everyone. I'm Vivek from Bangalore, India. I'm actually currently studying a Bachelor of Psychological Science program. And I love dancing. I love the beaches. I love to Netflix and chill. A lot of budget traveling. Very big fan, and especially a much bigger fan of animes and mangas, and also like exploring a lot of new foods. Just to name a few things. I also I enjoy doing these things obviously when I'm not studying, and I'm very excited to share my tips with you today.
Wow, thank you, Vivek. So it's very great to hear your view. Now I'd like to introduce our second speaker for today, which is David Uy. David has really awesome insights about managing his lifestyle on a given allowance. So David, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David from Phnom Penh, Cambodia. I'm currently pursuing bachelor degree in information technology. So I spend most of my free time either sleeping or watching a movie or reading. And beside that, I also love to do a bit of traveling and enjoying different type of food. I'm very excited to be here and share my journey and tips with all of you today.
Thank you so much, David. So before we begin the actual debate, I'd like to invite each of our student marketer speakers to share more about their financial management strategies. You can talk about how you budget your monthly allowance and manage your finances effectively without needing to really disclose the specific amounts, of course. So let's kick it off with Melissa.
Yeah, absolutely, Sophia. Well, my parents give me a monthly allowance, which I manage by prioritizing my expenses. As a local Singaporean, I don't have to spend on accommodation, which helps me allocate more to other necessities. I dedicate a significant portion of my budget to essentials like food and transportation. For example, I often eat out at hawker centers, which are a very affordable option, and occasionally I treat myself to cafes. Also, I will set aside money for personal interests like makeup and clothes and shopping. The girls will understand. To save money, I often buy online from platforms like Lazada, Shopee, and Amazon, always comparing prices to get the best deals, especially because they do have good deals from time to time every month. Additionally, I allocate some of my budget to fitness-related activities to stay healthy. Moreover, I make it a point to save a portion each month for unexpected expenses or future needs, which to me is very important. By tracking my spending and being mindful of my budget, I ensure I live comfortably without overspending.
Wow, that was such an interesting, thing to say, Melissa. So I guess now I'd like to hear more from Vivek. Do you think you can share how you budget and manage your monthly allowance effectively?
Yeah, absolutely, Sophia. I think sometimes I really do feel like I'm the CFO of my own life. Since I like to believe I manage my budget like a pro. You'd be really shocked to know that despite all those news reports about Singapore being one of the most expensive cities to live in, I've actually found that there are quite a few things here that are very affordable. This was really quite the surprise when I came here, to be very frank. And and a lot of these small things that I learned over time have actually helped me save a lot. And as an international student from India, I've had to get really creative with planning my finances in Singapore. So my monthly allowance, I think my accommodation takes up about two-thirds of my budget. So I try and live very close to campus. It saves a lot of the transportation costs and whatnot. For food, I cook at least twice a week. I like to think I'm fairly good at it, but I always try and learn to make other new kinds of dishes from my friends over here. I also often try a lot of the local cuisines along with other dishes like the Japanese sushi and a nice classic American steak every now and then. And obviously, this is only whenever I get the chance to. Uh, I think the food courts here are really amazing. I think, as far as I remember, they offer like over 40 different kinds of food and drinks and desserts. And a meal usually costs nothing more than like $10. As for clothes, I brought most of mine from India. But if I really need more, which I generally tend to, I head to either Bugis or I wait for like a good sale day to buy some trendy but budget friendly fashion clothing. Yeah, and I mean it's definitely a lot cheaper than what I get at Orchard Road. I also love engaging in a lot of the low cost activities. I think like exploring beach areas, maybe like finding some new restaurants, which many might not have even heard of. And I think I live quite comfortably overall without really overspending. I just do it by simply keeping track of my spending and sticking to my budget. And then so far, I think, yeah, I think I've done a pretty good job. Yeah.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing again, Vivek. So now, David, could you tell us how your approach is to managing your allowance?
Of course, Sophia. So managing my finances in Singapore is quite different from in my country. Like the accommodation is like it take up most of my budget. So I live close to the campus to save on transport. For clothing, like I'm a guy, I don't spend much as I usually just wear a simple t-shirt, shorts and slippers, like due to the hot weather in Singapore. Moreover, I also brought most of my clothes from Cambodia, and like I bring back more clothes whenever I go home. For food, I just eat at hawker center or school canteen. Most of the time, I eat lunch at school canteen because of my class schedule. But for like dinners, I usually go to hawker center. The food there is usually cost less than $10. I like there are 30 to 40 different kind of food to choose from. Moreover, I also like enjoy going for coffee or bubble tea or Chinese dessert on the weekend. It's affordable. And for entertainment, like in my free time, I just enjoy reading online or watching anime or Netflix, which doesn't cost much. And also the school have free Wi-Fi. So if like after class, I just stay at school to just chill and watch a show or movies on my laptop. And the other thing is, decided I just chill and don't spend much. So that's how I manage to keep my allowance, like I keep my spending under control.
Wow, thank you, David. That was so nice to hear from you. I guess it's my turn to share more about my personal experiences when it comes to managing my allowance here in Singapore, coming from LA, of course. So I guess with the stronger USD, I do find that certain things are much more affordable here. For example, eating out at hawker centers, I really do enjoy, and it's way cheaper than eating out in LA. Like a plate of chicken rice here costs around, I guess, 350 SGD, which is only about $2 in USD. So it's pretty awesome for me. If the outdoor concept of hawker centers feels a bit too hot, I'd like, some AC. Food courts are always very affordable too and provide a more comfortable alternative. When it comes to accommodation, I think it's a very significant part of my budget, but due thanks to the strong USD, I can afford to stay in a condo, which offers a more comfortable living environment. Transportation, which is quite fascinating to me actually, is also very affordable in Singapore. The city is so small, so getting around via public transport like MRTs and the buses usually cost me less than 2 SGD per trip. So I guess like many young people out there, like many of us, I spend a significant amount of time online for more like entertainment and daily necessity purposes. So I use my iPhone to watch YouTube and shop for clothes and buy daily necessities, and makeup, like, the girls know. So online shopping is generally cheaper and items are delivered directly to my doorstep. Things rarely get lost here, which is a big plus. This helps to reduce costs as traveling back to the USA, like a 16, 18-hour flight, it's not really feasible for me. So this is one of my favorite things to do, which is, explore the free activities in Singapore. The greenery is just so fascinating to me, and I'm just always in awe whenever I go to like Bukit Timah Hill or McRitchie Treetop Trail. I love the monkeys, they're so fun. There's so many parks for running, and I often do yoga at home or in community spaces with, my friends or other people as well. And a few perks is my condo offers free swimming pool and gym access. So I don't really have to go out and, spend money for a gym membership. How awesome is that? So overall, I would say I find that living here is way cheaper than in the States. And I'm so grateful for my parents. Hopefully they're here for providing enough allowance to cover my expenses so I can focus on my studies. So now that, we've all shared our own personal insights, let's move on to the main topic of the webinar. Back to you, Melissa.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, guys. These are really smart tips. So now moving on to the main topics of today's webinar, we have three important questions to discuss, and I'm excited to hear everyone's insights. So for the first question, what are essential expenses one should prioritize when living on a $1,000 allowance? This is a significant concern for many students coming from abroad. Prioritizing essential expenses can help manage your budget more effectively. So let's get David to share some of his practical tips on what essential expenses you should prioritize. David, please.
Sorry. So for in Singapore, the largest part of your budget will likely go toward housing. So I would recommend like sharing with your friends. I personally share with one of my friends at my HDB. For food, you can allocate a certain part of your budget toward food, and you just spend that for groceries or like eatings outside at hawkers. And for transport, I would recommend using public transportation. You can have your ride like at every 5 minutes. It's very efficient compared to my country. Like we have to wait like 15 to half an hour. In Singapore, usually 5 to 10 minutes, which is very nice. And try to avoid using Grab or Gojeks as much as possible because it's very expensive. You can invest in a bicycle or use a cycle sharing app to go around. It's also very affordable. Uh, that's that's all my opinion. But for me, I usually walk to school because I live across the campus. Yeah, that's all from me.
Wow, thanks, David. I think it must be a perk that you live, super close to school. Anyways, let's go on back to Melissa, our co-host. I'm really intrigued. As a local staying here, what are the essential expenses that you have to prioritize?
Yeah, of course. Well, I guess as a local, I'll probably go into more of the nitty-gritty details of things. So, for example, like utilities, due to the lack of natural resources in Singapore, air conditioning and water expenses are very expensive in Singapore, and especially a lot of us would rather stay in more air-conditioned environments in Singapore. A lot of us would probably like to stay indoors with our aircons on. So the utility bills can easily exceed up to $200 per month if you're not careful. So a tip is that you should look for accommodations that include utilities, or be mindful of usage by turning off your lights and conserving water as much as you can. So sharing internet costs with your roommates can also help save a lot of money. Well, another part is health and personal care. I guess because health care in Singapore can also be really costly without insurance. So investing in personal insurance is essential to avoid unexpected bills, especially because you never know when you fall sick, especially under the stressful conditions of the universities. To stay healthy, I guess despite all the stress, you should ensure that you get enough nutrients, eat well, and practice self-care all the time. And buying personal care products in bulks can also help a lot, cutting down on your expenses because you can buy them during the sales, or you can buy them in bulks, which help reduce a lot of costs.
Wow, those are some really insightful and great tips, Melissa. We indeed do need to be careful about our utility spending. I know I have to. And practice personal health care and self-care while most of us are studying here in Singapore away from our homes. So I'm curious, Vivek, how about you? What strategies have you found helpful to share with our prospective students keen to know what items they should prioritize their expenses in Singapore within $1,000 budget?
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. So since I'm here for my studies, just like the four of us, I think for me, my first priority is academic expenses, obviously. So this includes stuff like textbooks, stationery, and anything else like software or any other software, like maybe like what online subscriptions and whatnot. But my issue is that I'm actually quite scared of big books. So I try and look for like some secondhand books, with like less pages ideally, or maybe like I also prefer like the digital versions, and it also saves me a lot of money. I think for one example is I use a lot of ebooks whenever possible, which are often cheaper and more convenient and a lot less scary because it's all on like one screen, so don't need to worry about the big pages. I think my next most important thing for me is my clothing and my personal items. So I budget quite strongly for clothing and personal items. I do this by like shopping during like when sales are going on, or maybe like at discount stores, like I mentioned before. And Singapore has many, many budget-friendly stores and sales events where we can get like a lot of amazing deals. I usually wait for one of these sales days, like the Great Singapore Sale, if I'm not wrong, to buy what I need. And I think the last most important thing for me is social activities. I usually allocate like a small portion of my budget for socializing and leisure activities, but while also being very mindful of my spending, of course. I would suggest for looking for any free, maybe low cost events like community festivals or like university hosted events. And I often try and attend free events and use the student discounts to enjoy activities without really overspending too much. Yeah, I think like focusing on these three essentials for me personally while being mindful of your spending could help you save significantly so that you can stay within the $1,000 budget range while also enjoying that true essence of the student life, Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Vivek. I too get a bit bothered by big books. So lucky our schools, textbooks are easily accessible online. So these tips are very practical and highlight important aspects of managing expenses on a budget. Thank you all for your practical tips. So now we should move on to our second question. What are some ways to eat healthily and stay active on a $1,000 allowance in Singapore? So, this advice can help prospective students understand how to practice self care while studying overseas in Singapore, demonstrating that it is doable. So, should we invite Sophia, our host, to start first? Could you share some tips on how international students can eat healthily and stay active within this allowance?
I guess that's a really interesting question. Thanks, Melissa. So, staying fit without breaking the bank is pretty much all about what, making the most out of Singapore has to offer. And, what I touched upon earlier, like the outdoor exercise and university sports clubs, amazing. Jogging at parks or nearby beaches in Singapore is a really fantastic option. When it's not too hot, of course. It's free, the views are stunning, the air is so fresh and like crisp, So there are many beautiful spots, perfect for outdoor activities. Many parks also have sports stations where you can tone up your muscles, all for free. And other ways that, people can stay active include, joining free community yoga sessions in the park or taking advantage of like the online fitness classes and stuff. And my own personal favorite is like ClassPass and like being able to join different classes and, use the credits that you attain monthly as well. In regards to university though, there's so many sports clubs that are often free for students. Like, there's badminton, there's football, and they're all really excellent ways that people can, expand and, meet new people, maintain a healthy lifestyle without having to spend that extra money. So I guess by making use of these free or low cost options, international students can stay fit and enjoy their life in Singapore without breaking the bank.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. I love these tips. Thank you for sharing. As a serial ClassPass user, I totally agree. I love it. Now, we are one step closer to getting better health, and it's still possible to study here within a budget. So, how about we get our next student marketer speaker, Vivek, on his view on this topic?
Yeah, sure. Uh, I think balancing meals on a budget is very crucial for any student who wants to make sure they focus really well on their studies while here in Singapore. I think we can start with the small things like prioritizing water and like fruit juices instead of spending on all that sugary stuff like Coca-Cola, Fanta, and whatnot. And maybe like also, it also helps to steer clear of fast foods like KFC, McDonald's, and even those trendy places like Shake Shack. And try and do this as often as you can. I understand that, these fast food places are very, very tempting. I myself am tempted quite a lot. But yeah, I think the next most important thing is focusing on preparing meals at home, which saves a whole lot of money. And it also ensures like a very nutritious diet. I think you can opt for alternate protein sources which are very affordable like beans, lentils, eggs, tofu, which are cheaper alternatives, and you can only do this if the budget is like super tight for you that particular month. And I think it's also important to note that different stores have different prices, so it's always a good idea to compare to find the best deals when shopping for healthy cooking ingredients. And lastly, is making the most of leftovers. Although I save as much as I can to avoid this, sometimes it's desperate times, desperate measures. And it's also important to note, when you're when you're doing storing leftovers, it's really important to make sure you maintain the proper hygiene. Since nobody likes having bad stomach days, you know what I mean. Yeah, I think for me, these are some of the strategies that help me maintain a healthy diet without really overspending too much. Yeah.
These are some great points, Vivek. While you sound like you know your way around the kitchen well, I can't wait. Maybe you can share some of your ingredients and tips and recipes. Well, and it's so true that many of us can't finish our food and we end up throwing them away, which is such a waste. So, especially considering because food is scarce in other parts of the world, we should definitely take up these great tips on saving the food consumption. How about David? What are your views on this topic? I believe our audience will be happy to learn more tips to stay healthy. So let's get going, David.
Thanks, Melissa. I believe the audience might not know much about the public sports facility in Singapore. For example, the basketball court and soccer field in park and community centers are often free or just cost around $3 to $10 per hour. You can book these through an app called Active SG. Tennis court and swimming pool are also affordable, with pool entry fees around $1.5 to $2 per entry, and running track and fitness corner are free, so you don't need to book for those. To like book all of these facilities, you just need to download an app called Active SG and create an account, then book immediately. So additionally, you can also enjoy other outdoor activity like jogging around the parks or just riding bicycle. You can either invest in the bicycle or just like me, I use the bicycle sharing app. I purchased the monthly plan, which is $10 per month. And as long as I switch the bike or have to scan the parking every 30 minutes, I don't need to pay any extra fees. So this tip will like help you stay active and healthy without breaking the bank. Back to you.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. I actually had no idea about Active SG. So I'm definitely gonna give it a try. Thanks again. So thank you actually to everyone for those, valuable insights. Our audience has learned a lot today about managing a tight budget of $1,000. But before we, wrap things up, we have one final question that we'd like to discuss. Should international students prioritize saving over spending on experiences while studying abroad in Singapore? You know what? Let's hear from Vivek. Do you think you can start us off with your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sophia. I think for me, I believe that while saving is really, really important for managing your finances, uh, I also believe in experiences since I love that a lot. And, we should not be neglecting them. For example, you could allocate a very small part of your budget for like unique cultural experiences, maybe like taking a cooking class or learning a bit more about the local cuisine, or, I think even visiting like iconic attractions like the famous gardens by the bay, or even the brilliant Singapore Zoo. These experiences not only contribute to one's personal growth and cultural understanding, but they create some amazing, beautiful memories with your friends, which are very lasting, you know. But at the same time, I think you should still save for essential expenses, obviously, like your rent, your groceries, and in case of any emergencies, always having an emergency fund really helps. We have to be really careful when we plan and set aside these funds for saving and for experiences. Uh, this also kind of ensures that students enjoy the best of both worlds, which is financial stability and enriching life experiences.
Wow, thank you again, Vivek. That was some pretty awesome insights that you got there. I guess comparing the difference between what to spend and what to save is really awesome. So now let's hear Melissa's view on this. Take it away.
Well, I agree with Vivek to an extent, but I think personally that international students should prioritize on saving, especially in a city as expensive as Singapore. We'll never know what happens, right? So, for example, students should save on it for essential and unpredictable expenses such as medical emergencies, which can be quite costly without insurance. Additionally, I think building up an emergency fund is very crucial for unexpected situations, like I said. For example, in case you have to fly home due to a family emergency or any medical emergencies that may happen, things do come about, you know. So to manage this budget effectively, students should focus on saving for these essential costs while also planning for some experiences. So maybe perhaps instead of frequent high cost outings, students can save for a few significant experiences like a trip to nearby Southeast Asian countries, especially if you like traveling out of the country during the breaks, or a special dining experience at renowned local restaurants that do happen to be all around Singapore. So this way, they can ensure financial security while also still enjoying meaningful and memorable experiences during their time abroad in Singapore. So these are just some of my tips. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Those are some awesome tips, Melissa. I think it'd be a really great idea for everyone to, I guess, to explore, the other Southeast Asian countries out there, since we are super central. Anywho, now I want to hear from David. What's your take on this?
Um, so from my perspective, I think it's important to balance between saving and enjoying your time abroad. Like, I mean, I know it's like saving, it will help you a lot when it comes to cover essential expense, like buying good study material or technology for school. But I mean, like you're as an international student, you're coming here to study abroad, so make the most out of it. Like you can set aside some money each month for fun activity, just like trying out local hawker or other like famous spots in Singapore. And there are also plenty of free or cheap things to do, like visiting parks, checking out museum on discount day, and using public sport facility. I mean, like if by balancing those two, you can make sure like you have what you did for school and also enjoying the unique experience in Singapore. That's from me.
Thank you. Actually, thank you to all of you for, all of your insightful perspectives. It was great to hear everyone's, views and ideas. It's very clear that there's like valid arguments coming from both sides of the debate. Like one hand, saving does provide that like financial security that I guess we all kind of desire, and peace of mind as well, which I believe, being an international student, it's very crucial. But for example, saving for essential items like rent or groceries, that's very fundamental. And on the other hand, the experience and personal growth opportunities while studying abroad are just invaluable, and I wouldn't take away any of those experiences for the world. So for instance, spending on experiences like visiting historical sites or joining social clubs can significantly enhance anyone's time abroad. So finding the balance between saving and spending on experiences seems to be a common theme here. And I'd like to thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our discussion on navigating life in Singapore on an allowance of $1,000. We've covered so many things like essential expenses, tips for eating healthily and staying active, and the balance between saving and spending on experiences.
Exactly, Sophia. I think we've all shared some practical advice on budgeting, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and making the most of your time in Singapore. So I hope these tips can help prioritize essential expenses like housing and food, while also finding affordable ways to stay active and engaged. Well, these to me, I feel are the key to managing your budget effectively.
Yeah, so as we like to wrap up, remember that this session was recorded and will be available on our social media platforms. Mark your calendars for our next webinar, Do's and Don'ts for Finding Ideal Accommodation in Singapore on the 30th of August, 2024 from 12 to 1 p.m. And we do appreciate your time and participation today.
Yeah. We hope that you found this webinar helpful and informative. So to stay connected with us, you can go through our Student Marketers social media pages for more useful information and updates. So we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Now, we'd like to open the floor to any questions you may have. Please type your questions in the chat box and we'll address them one by one. So go ahead and ask us anything you have in mind. Don't be scared.
Oh, Melissa, I see that we do have a question here. So I guess I'll just present it. Were there any sudden school expenses causing you to spend more in a particular month? Maybe let's hear from David.
From my experience, there's no sudden expenses from school because normally I just pay the school fees and then that's it. Unless there are some event hosted by some club and then I would like to join, then of course they will charge. But it's not that huge. So if I want to join, I will just join. That's from my experience.
Oh, interesting, interesting. What about you, Vivek?
I think so far I've been here for like almost like a little over a year now, and so far I haven't had any unexpected expenses from the university per se. I mean, yeah, in general, I've had like other unexpected expenses, of course, like suddenly maybe like food prices shot up or something like that. But in terms of university, not really. Yeah, no, not that I can think of.
Okay, very interesting. You guys have like very similar, I guess, experiences where you didn't really have to, have any sudden school expenses. So it's very interesting. I think for me as well. But yeah, Melissa, you want to take away the next question?
Yeah, also adding on, perhaps maybe not school expenses, but maybe sometimes you stay back with some friends for school activities and you like to go out for a meal or two. And perhaps sometimes you were thinking of going home to cook and instead you have last minute plans to join your friends. And sometimes it could mess up a bit on your budgeting, like instead of going home to cook and saving a bit of money, you decide to go out with friends. So maybe these are some um occasions that could happen from time to time because you wouldn't know sometimes that your friends would like invite you out for dinner and whatnot, and you have to spend a little bit extra. So perhaps that's why saving comes in very important as well, because it gives you more leeway for you to have more liberty over your expenses as well. So just in case, well, yeah, I see other questions. The next question would be, do you find it cheaper to make meals at home or to buy out? Well, let's get Vivek, the chef, to share with us some of your tips.
Uh, yeah, okay. So this one, definitely making meals at home is a hell of a lot cheaper. Normally I like to cook a pasta, which is like very simple ingredients. Sometimes I splurge a little bit, so I can have like a slightly fancy meal, maybe like a homemade chicken steak or like some French toast for dinner, because why not? But yeah, definitely meals at home is cheaper, but I also think that we should be eating out every now and then, because the way the Singapore culture is, like when I first came in, that was like the biggest culture shock, like more than I haven't really had much of culture shocks wherever I've been. But in terms of Singapore, the food wise, that was the biggest culture shock, because the culture here is a lot about eating out, right? And because the meals are relatively cheap, despite Singapore being advertised as one of the most expensive places to live in. Uh, but yeah, making meals at home is definitely there, but it's I think it like I would say maybe like there's like a difference of like $3 to $4, which initially seems like a significant amount, but then when you're staying here for long periods of time, the cumulative kind of adds up. to like exorbitant amounts. But at the same time, I don't think you should you should avoid eating out entirely because like it's fun, lah. Yeah, but that's what I think.
Yeah, that's that's quite true as well. I do agree. Especially because they added, is the budget inclusive of having a partner, for example, girlfriend, or as a single? Well, let's hear from Sophia. What do you think?
Mm, I would say it's more inclusive. I think it could be both in a way. Like if you do have a partner, I think it would be inclusive, but if you don't, it wouldn't be. I think a bit like that, but it would be more difficult to make things like the budget inclusive of having a partner because it's another person that essentially you are funding or caring for. But for me personally, as a single, I do find it a lot easier because I'm not overspending on meals or gifts or stuff like that. But personally, my budget of $1,000 is very difficult to stay within, but manageable, and teaches me a lot about self-control as well. So that's just my view.
Yeah, let's hear from a guy. David, how about you? Have you been on any dates that possibly would have to bust the budget a little bit to accommodate with a partner?
So dating in Singapore like is expensive. So yeah, if like you have a partner as a guy, like in Singapore, like you have to take them out to eat on a dates. I don't know about others, but sometimes I pay for both of us. So yeah, it's gonna be over the budget of 1,000 if
Yeah,
we were
I
dating.
definitely agree with David on that one. It's definitely like obviously, I think the $1,000 is more suitable as a single, but obviously if you've got a girlfriend and stuff, yeah, be prepared to spend a lot more because like girls obviously will have their own expenses that with if they have a boyfriend, we have to cover it. We don't really have much of a choice. But yeah, be prepared to spend, man. Be prepared to spend.
I'm glad that you guys are paying for the meals. I thank you guys for sharing, especially for the guys that are taking the initiative to treat the girls right. So the next question, when you say $1,000 SGD allowance, do you include accommodation costs? So let's hear from the international students. Sophia?
Automatically no. My rent is way higher than $1,000. So I think the 1,000 allotted allowance would definitely just go to the extra expenses, food, transportation, leisure activities, rent not included for me. So anyone else?
Uh, I do have a take on this actually because I know somebody, one of my friends who actually spends has $1,000 allowance inclusive of accommodation. But I think there's a very huge sacrifice that this person makes on in terms of like food, which I'm not really up to doing that strategy because I have a very high metabolic count and as such I need to eat a lot. Uh, but like average, I think most people $1,000 just includes your living, your groceries, and all of that. It doesn't account for rent. And I mean, if you want to include rent, it also depends on the kind of place you're looking for, what you're willing to compromise on. Like in my case, I took a slightly more expensive place because there were certain requirements that I had myself. Things like I wanted my own personal washroom. I did not want to share because I did not want to clean after other people. Ideally, I wanted a place which is like on a higher floor where there's sunlight coming in. So the more requirements you have, like the more specifications, the more pricey it tends to get from the research that I've done. But if you're okay with compromising on a lot of things, yeah, you can actually, in fact, get like I think my friend who I was talking about, they pay about like $550 a month, and they live right opposite uni. So like there's like zero transportation costs. He legit like walks 5 minutes and bam, he's in uni. So yeah, it is possible, but it does come with a lot of sacrifices. So if you're willing to make that, I'd say go for it.
Wow, that's really interesting actually. I haven't heard anybody living on $1,000 allowance with having to pay for their accommodation costs. How about you, David? What do you think?
I think like my rent is over 1,000. So yeah, so 1,000 doesn't include rent. Even because like I share the whole unit, so yeah, including electricity and utility, is over 1,000 already. That's all.
Wow. Thanks, David. Actually, all of us had very interesting views on things, in regards to, accommodation costs inclusive of, the $1,000. But I guess due to time constraint, I think we should move on to our last question. Um, what about like expenses from accommodation? Any tips on how you bargain with the landlord on maybe like who pays for the AC repair or maintenance? This is an interesting question. I haven't really thought of it. So Vivek, do you have a view on this?
Yes, because I had this exact conversation with my dad a while back because he wanted me to try and see if we can reduce the rent at least. So it's actually very simple. You just talk to the landlord, and it also depends on this thing, how long you're signing your lease for, which is very, very important. I so when I signed on, like when I initially came to Singapore, I was this thing, I was paying the full amount, but I think when I signed a 1 year contract, I got like $150 discount when I requested, which was really nice. I know it's a small amount, but again, like if you add $150 reduction per month, it's like it really adds up to quite an exorbitant amount. I think it's about what, like way over like, wait, let me think. Like 3,000, yeah, like $3,600 you save on, which is a lot of money, which can go in so many other places for extra splurging lah. But yeah, you just have to talk to the landlord, and they're usually very friendly, so they tend to help you out.
Okay. That's interesting. It's interesting that you had your own personal experience with that. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory then. We actually have one more question that we'd like to entertain. I like this question. How do you keep it within a budget of if you're someone who loves to club? And, as someone, I would say myself, I love to club, but I know that it breaks the bank. So what I do is I use it as an incentive per se. Like if I do all my tasks in a certain week, or if I know that I'm doing what I need to do in regards to school or uni, I'll like set aside enough money so that I can have and enjoy a night out with my friends like Vivek and Melissa and David, night out on the town or whatever. But I guess that's just me. I like to just treat myself instead of going out every Wednesday for ladies' night, or every Friday and Saturday. It's just a very occasional thing now. What about you guys? What are your views on this? Melissa.
Wow, that's a bit tricky, especially because if you go out and you like to indulge in like drinking with friends, alcohol in Singapore is not the cheapest as well. Yeah, so I guess er, you might have to cut down. If not, I guess you have to be very wary of your day-to-day expenses. And then maybe at the end of the week, you're like, oh, I saved up enough to go to like the club to pay for my entry fee and to go for like drinks with friends. I mean, it is fun, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, just gotta be wary with like your expenses, especially because when you go to the club, you end late and then you have to perhaps take a grab home because the public transport closes by like 3 a.m. So you might have to um also fork up an amount for the transport home. If not, you gotta wait until like 5, 6 a.m. for like the bus. Yeah. Vivek, do you want to share anything from your past experiences?
Sure. Why not? So the thing is, so okay, wait. So before I answer that, I actually wanted to cover this other part of the question that I actually did not read. Uh, by HZ, who pays for AC repair or maintenance? So there is a policy in Singapore that you have to, any contract will state that you have to cover the AC costs. That is definitely a mandatory thing, and it's not super expensive. It's like, I think, 20, I pay like $25 a month, so it's relatively pretty good. So I don't think that should be a very super big concern. In terms of the clubbing, uh so I like to club a lot, and obviously I actually don't drink any alcohol or anything like that. So what But I do like to club. In fact, I like to club a little too much. So I understand where you're coming from, just. But how I like to do it is I try to party like twice a month. I think this thing a fair amount, because I don't want to stop myself from clubbing, but I also don't want to like focus way too much on the savings bit. And I expect myself, like, I keep this thing expectation, like, hey, so today I'm going clubbing, I'm gonna spend this much and I'm not gonna cross this no matter what, right? Like, even if I want to get more Red Bull or whatever, I like, in my head I set it up that I'm not gonna spend more than this. So as long as you have like a good amount of self control with the amount that you're spending, and if you've set your mind on how much you're going to spend that day, yeah, I don't think it should be much of an issue. But yeah.
Wow, okay. Thanks for that view, Vivek. I guess since there's no further questions, we should wrap it up here. We hope these tips are super helpful for those of you considering coming to Singapore to study, and they help you get better prepared.
Yeah. And before we go, I'd like to add a final goodbye to our student marketers, Vivek, David, and our audience today. So I'd like to extend our final thank you also to all our student marketers, including myself, to all our audience members today for joining us and your kind attention. It was wonderful to have you with us this afternoon, and we hope that we can see you again at our next webinar. So take care, best of luck in Singapore. I hope you make good decisions and you have a great time here, and all the best in your future studies. Goodbye.
Ciao.